You know that feeling when your mind just won't turn off, when you're lying in bed or sitting quietly, and instead of rest or peace or even just nothing, there's this constant stream of thoughts rushing through your head, layer upon layer of mental noise that never seems to stop? Maybe it's conversations replaying from earlier today or last week or years ago, analyzing what you said and what they said and what it all meant. Or maybe it's your brain spinning forward into tomorrow or next month, rehearsing scenarios that haven't happened yet, preparing for problems that might never come. Or maybe it's just this formless buzzing, this background static of worry and anticipation and half-formed thoughts that never quite resolve into anything clear, but never quite go away either. And you try to focus on something else, try to read or watch something or just be present. But the thoughts keep intruding, keep pulling your attention back into that internal noise. And it's exhausting. It's so deeply exhausting to never have silence inside your own head, to feel like your mind is this runaway train that you're trapped on with no way to slow down or get off or even just rest for a moment. You look at other people and they seem so calm, so present, so able to just be without this constant mental tornado. And you wonder what's wrong with you, why your brain won't cooperate, why you can't just think less, be quieter, find some internal peace the way everyone else seems to manage without even trying. But here's the truth that I need you to hear. You're not broken, your mind isn't defective. And this constant thinking, as exhausting and overwhelming as it is, it's not happening randomly or because you're doing something wrong. It's happening because your brain is trying to protect you, trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows how, which is to think through every possibility, analyze every situation, stay alert to every potential threat. Never let its guard down, because letting your guard down feels dangerous when you've learned through experience that the world can be unpredictable or painful or scary. Your overactive mind is actually a sign of an anxious nervous system that's stuck in a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning for danger, constantly trying to solve problems before they happen, constantly working to prevent the bad outcomes it's terrified of. And while this strategy might have helped you survive difficult situations in the past, it's also keeping you trapped in a cycle of mental exhaustion that never quite resolves because the threats your brain is preparing for often aren't real threats. They're possibilities, maybes, what-ifs that exist only in your imagination, but that feel just as urgent and dangerous as if they were happening right now. When your mind races with thoughts, when it loops through the same worries and conversations and scenarios over and over, what's actually happening is that your brain is trying to find resolution, trying to achieve a sense of completion or safety or control that it desperately wants but can't quite reach. Rumination, that repetitive thinking about past events, it happens because your brain is trying to make sense of something that felt threatening or confusing or painful. Try to understand what went wrong or what you could have done differently, trying to extract some lesson or meaning that will prevent similar pain in the future. But because the past can't be changed and situations are often more complex than simple cause and effect, your brain never finds the resolution it's seeking. So it just keeps thinking, keeps analyzing, keeps trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle. And the anticipatory thinking, the mental rehearsing of future conversations or events or problems, that's your brain trying to prepare, trying to control outcomes by thinking through every scenario and planning for every possibility. But the future is inherently uncertain, and no amount of mental preparation can actually guarantee safety or success. So your brain just keeps generating more scenarios, more what-ifs, more possibilities to prepare for. And the thinking never ends because there's always something else to worry about, always something else that could go wrong. For those of you with anxious minds, your nervous system has learned to interpret ambiguity and uncertainty as dangerous. So when there's something unknown or unresolved in your life, even something small, your brain treats it like a threat and activates the same stress response it would activate if you were facing actual physical danger, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline, putting you on high alert. And in that state, your mind naturally starts racing because it's trying to find solutions, trying to regain control, trying to make the threat go away. But everyday life is full of uncertainty and ambiguity, full of situations you can't control and outcomes you can't predict. So your brain is essentially in a constant state of activation, constantly thinking because it's constantly perceiving threat. And this becomes the baseline, the normal state of being, until you can't remember what it feels like to have a quiet mind, because you've been living with this internal noise for so long that it just seems like who you are, like this is just how your brain works. There's also something called cognitive overload, which happens when your brain is processing too much information at once, when you're trying to hold too many thoughts or tasks or concerns in your working memory simultaneously. And when your brain gets overloaded, it doesn't just stop thinking. It actually starts thinking more frantically, jumping from thought to thought without completing any of them, creating this chaotic mental state where nothing feels clear or settled and everything feels urgent and overwhelming. And then there's emotional residue, feelings from past experiences or even from earlier in the day that haven't been fully processed or expressed, emotions that got suppressed or pushed aside because you didn't have time or space or safety to feel them. And those unprocessed emotions often show up as intrusive thoughts or anxious rumination, your mind circling around the feelings it can't quite access or express, trying to make sense of why you feel the way you feel, trying to think its way through something that actually needs to be felt rather than thought about. Some of you learned early in life that thinking was how you stayed safe, that by being vigilant and anticipating problems you could avoid punishment or disappointment or abandonment, that by analyzing situations carefully you could figure out how to be acceptable or lovable or enough. And your brain built neural pathways that reinforced this pattern, made overthinking your default mode of being because it genuinely helped you navigate difficult circumstances. But now, even though your circumstances may have changed, even though you're an adult with more agency and resources and the ability to make choices about your environment, those neural pathways are still there, still firing automatically, still pulling you into overthinking even when it's no longer necessary or helpful. Because the brain tends to repeat patterns that once worked even when they're no longer serving you well. And breaking those patterns, teaching your brain that it's safe to be quiet, that not every uncertainty requires intense analysis, that you can let thoughts pass without engaging with them. That takes time and practice and patience, because you're essentially rewiring neural pathways that have been strengthened over years or decades. But here's what I want you to know. Your mind can learn quiet, not by forcing it or fighting it or trying to shut down your thoughts through sheer willpower, but by gently, gradually teaching your nervous system that it's safe to relax, that not everything requires your constant mental attention, that you can let your guard down without catastrophe, and that quiet is not dangerous. It's actually where restoration happens, where your brain gets to rest, and your nervous system gets to recalibrate, and your whole being gets to simply exist without the exhausting work of constant thinking. So let's practice that together now. Let's see if we can find even just a few moments of softness and quiet, not by trying to stop thinking, but by creating space around the thoughts, by shifting your attention from the content of your thinking to the experience of being in your body, of being in this moment, of existing as more than just a mind. Start by noticing where you are right now physically in this space, and just acknowledging that you're here, that your body is sitting or lying somewhere, being supported by something solid beneath you. You don't need to change anything about your position, just notice it. Feel the places where your body makes contact with what's holding you, the pressure and weight and temperature of that contact. And then bring your awareness to your breath, not trying to breathe in any particular way, not trying to make it deep or slow or perfect, just noticing that breathing is happening. That air is moving in and out of your body in this steady rhythm that's been happening since you were born and will continue happening without you needing to think about it or control it. Place one hand on your chest or your belly if that feels okay, feeling the slight rise and fall under your palm, and just being with that movement for a few breaths, letting your attention rest there instead of in your thoughts. Your mind will probably want to pull you back into thinking, will probably generate thoughts about what you should be doing or worries about things you need to handle or judgments about whether you're doing this right. And that's okay. That's what minds do, especially anxious minds. But see if you can notice those thoughts without getting swept away by them, like watching clouds pass across the sky, acknowledging that they're there, but not chasing after them, not climbing into them, just letting them drift by while you keep your attention anchored in the physical sensation of breathing, of being held by what's beneath you, of existing in this body in this moment. This is not about making your thoughts stop, because trying to force your mind to be quiet usually just creates more mental noise, more judgment about why it's not working, more frustration that adds to the overwhelm. Instead, This is about practicing returning over and over, gently bringing your attention back to something simple and present whenever you notice you've been pulled into thinking, training your brain gradually that there's somewhere else to place attention besides the endless stream of thoughts. As you continue breathing, see if you can soften any tension you're holding in your body, maybe your shoulders or your jaw or your belly, places where anxiety often lives as physical tightness. And just letting those places release a little bit, not forcing relaxation, but inviting it, offering your body permission to let go of some of the holding it's been doing. And as you soften physically, you might notice that the quality of your thoughts shifts a little, that they're still there, but maybe less frantic, less demanding, like the volume has been turned down just slightly. And that's enough. That small shift is enough for now. Because quiet doesn't usually arrive all at once in a dramatic silence. It arrives in these small increments, in brief gaps between thoughts, in moments where you realize you've been present for a few seconds without thinking. And those moments, as brief as they are, they're evidence that your brain can rest, that your mind can be still, that underneath the constant noise there is actually silence available to you. You might also try bringing your awareness to sounds around you, listening without judgment or analysis, just hearing what's here, the sound of air moving, or distant traffic, or birds, or the hum of appliances, letting those sounds wash over you without needing to think about them or make meaning from them, just experiencing them as pure sensation. And this, too, is a way of giving your mind something to attend to besides its own thoughts, anchoring you in sensory experience rather than mental loops. Or you might gaze softly at something in your environment, maybe a plant or the way light falls across a wall, or the texture of fabric, really seeing it, taking it in visually without the mental commentary of this is a plant, or I should water that, or whatever thoughts arise, just pure seeing, the way a baby might look at something with fresh eyes, with curiosity and presence, but no interpretation. And if emotions come up as you sit quietly like this, if you feel sadness or frustration or fear or anything else, try to let those feelings be there alongside the quiet. Because sometimes the reason our minds won't stop thinking is that we're afraid of what we'll feel if we stop, afraid of the grief or loneliness or overwhelm that's been waiting underneath all that mental noise. And our constant thinking is actually a way of avoiding feelings that seem too big or too painful to face. But feelings, when we let them be present without resistance, they actually move through us. They rise and peak and eventually subside. And letting yourself feel even just a little bit can sometimes create more quiet than any amount of trying to control your thoughts ever could. Because your mind can stop working so hard to keep everything contained when you allow some of what's underneath to surface and be acknowledged. You might notice guilt coming up too. That voice that says you should be able to control your thoughts better. That you should be more present, more calm, more like other people who seem to navigate life without this constant mental chaos. And if that voice appears, see if you can meet it with compassion rather than agreement, recognizing that it's just another thought, another way your mind tries to keep you safe by making you believe that if you were just better or stronger or different then, you wouldn't have to deal with this struggle. But the truth is that millions of people have overactive minds. Millions of people struggle with racing thoughts and anxiety and the inability to find internal quiet. And it's not because they're failing at being human. It's because they have sensitive nervous systems that respond intensely to stress, or because they've experienced things that taught their brains to be hypervigilant, or because they carry anxiety that has genetic and neurological roots that aren't about personal failure at all. As you practice sitting with yourself like this, breathing and noticing and softening, you're teaching your brain something new. You're creating a different kind of experience than the one it's used to, an experience of presence rather than thinking, of being rather than doing, of quiet rather than noise. And your brain learns through experience, through repetition. So each time you practice returning to your breath or your body or the present moment, even if it's just for a few seconds before, your mind pulls you back into thinking. You're strengthening new neural pathways. You're showing your nervous system that it's safe to be still, that quiet won't lead to danger or abandonment or disaster, that you can survive and even thrive with less mental activity, with more space, with gentler attention to what's actually happening rather than constant preparation for what might happen. Over time, with patient practice, you might start to notice that you have more access to quiet, That there are moments in your day where your mind naturally settles, where you're able to be present without the constant stream of thoughts, where you can hear silence inside your own head, and it doesn't feel scary. It feels like relief, like rest, like coming home to yourself after being lost in mental noise for so long. These moments might be brief at first, just seconds here and there, but they'll gradually grow longer and more frequent as your nervous system learns that it can relax its vigilance, that not everything requires constant monitoring and analysis, that you can trust yourself to handle what comes without needing to think through every possibility in advance. And even when your mind is racing, even when the thoughts feel relentless and overwhelming, you can practice coming back to your body, to your breath, to the present moment, over and over, not as a failure when your mind wanders, but as the practice itself. Because the practice isn't having a quiet mind. The practice is noticing when you've been pulled into thinking and gently returning to presence. And that returning, that gentle redirection of attention, that's what creates change. That's what teaches your brain a different way of being. That's what allows quiet to gradually, slowly, softly become more accessible to you. You might also find it helpful to have times in your day where you consciously allow thinking, where you give yourself permission to worry or plan or ruminate for a specific period, like 10 or 15 minutes where you let your mind go wherever it wants to go. And then you practice transitioning out of that thinking time into presence, into being in your body, into quiet. Because sometimes trying to never think just creates more anxiety, but knowing you have a time and place for thinking can help your mind relax the rest of the time. The journey to a quieter mind is not linear. There will be days when your thoughts feel manageable and days when they're overwhelming, days when you can find stillness easily and days when it feels impossible. And all of that is okay. All of that is part of the process because you're working with a nervous system that's been patterned in certain ways over a long time, and changing those patterns takes patience and self-compassion and the willingness to keep practicing even when it feels like nothing's working. But something is working, even when you can't see it, even when your mind feels as noisy as ever. Because every time you notice your thoughts and choose to return to your breath, every time you soften into your body instead of staying trapped in your head, every time you meet yourself with kindness instead of criticism, you're creating change at a level deeper than conscious awareness. You're teaching your nervous system that it's safe to be quiet, that you don't need constant mental vigilance to survive, that you can rest and still be okay. And please know that you're not alone in this, that so many people are struggling with the exact same thing, lying awake at night with racing thoughts, sitting in meetings unable to focus because their mind won't stop spinning, feeling exhausted by the constant mental activity that never gives them a break. And all of those people, like you, they're not broken or weak or doing life wrong. They're just sensitive humans with nervous systems that are trying their best to keep them safe in ways that are no longer helpful. And they deserve compassion and patience and support as they learn new ways of being, new ways of relating to their thoughts, new ways of finding quiet in a mind that's been loud for so long. Your mind can learn calm, slowly and gently, through practice and patience and self-compassion. And quiet is not something you have to force or achieve or be perfect at. It's something you can grow, something you can cultivate, something that will naturally arise when you create the conditions for it by teaching your nervous system that it's safe to rest, that you're safe to be still, that not every moment requires thinking and analyzing and preparing, that sometimes, often, the most healing thing you can do is simply be here, breathing, present, allowing quiet to find you when you stop chasing it.